Hello dear friends, welcome back again to another video from my YouTube channel. Dear friends, in our previous video we talked about the development of male gametophyte in the form of pollen grains inside the anther, and we have seen the development of female gametophyte in the form of embryo sac within the ovule. Now that means male gametophyte is ready, female gametophyte is also ready. The only thing is the transfer of gametes. Normally, in majority of the sexually reproducing organisms, the male gametes, they move towards the female gametes. That is true even with our plants also. In plants also, the male gametophyte is moving towards the female gametophyte. That is the very interesting process that comes under the heading pollination. Pollination, to understand this concept in detail, we have to understand the two situations here. Here we have two plants of the same species. Say for example, it's plant A and plant B, and these are all matured plant. That means definitely they have got flowers in them. Let us label some parts, very important parts, to understand the process of pollination in detail. This is a flower. In this flower we have the male reproductive organ, that is androecium, and we have the female reproductive organ, that is gynoecium. We are labeling not all the parts of androecium and all the parts of gynoecium. We are labeling only those parts of androecium and gynoecium which are very helpful for our discussion. This is the anther, my dear friends. Anther. Now this is the stigma. This is the stigma. Stigma belongs to gynoecium, whereas anther is the most important part of androecium, because inside this anther, here we have the pollen grains. They are the pollens. Pollens are present on the anther after maturity, after dehiscence of anther. Pollen grains, they break the antheridial walls and they come out. That is called as anthesis. Anthesis means release of mature pollen grains by breaking the antheridial wall. It is also called as dehiscence of anther, my dear friends. Here we have labeled only three parts which are helpful for our discussion. Stigma belonging to the female part of the flower, anther belongs to the male part of the flower, and pollen grains, they are nothing but the male gametophytes. Now, what is pollination? Pollination. Male gametophyte is ready, female gametophyte is ready. That means male and female both are ready now. Only thing is transfer has to take place. That transfer is nothing but pollination. As we have discussed earlier, in sexually reproducing plants or sexually reproducing animals, in majority of the cases, male gametophyte or male gametes, they rush towards the female gamete. Now here also the transfer of pollen grains from where these pollen grains are located. Whether they are located on stigma or they are located on the anther, they are located on the anther. The transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma. Anther to the stigma. This process is called as pollination. What is pollination? The transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma is called as the pollination. Scientist has observed or classified pollinations into two types. Let us understand what are the two types of pollination. The first one is self-pollination. Self-pollination. And the second type of pollination is cross-pollination. Cross-pollination. They are the two major types of pollination. Now, first we'll understand what is this self-pollination. Self-pollination, it is also called as autogamy. autogamy. It is also called as autogamy. Let us understand what is this cell pollination or what is this autogamy by using this diagram. If the pollen grains, they transfer from anther to the stigma of same flower. Here the pollen grains are getting transfer from anther to the stigma of same flower. This is called as cell pollination. What is cell pollination? The transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of same flower. It is called as cell pollination. Let us write the definition of cell pollination. Transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of same flower. It is called as self-pollination. Now, what is cross-pollination? Cross-pollination, it is also called as allogamy. It is also called as allogamy. Allogamy are of two types. There are two types of allogamy. One is geitonogamy. The first type of cross-pollination is geitonogamy, and second type of cross-pollination, it is xenogamy. Xenogamy. There are two types of cross-pollination. One is geitonogamy, another one is xenogamy. Let us understand what is geitonogamy and xenogamy. Then we'll define what is the definition of cross-pollination. Geitonogamy means transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of another flower located on the same plant. Here we have got two flowers located in the same plant. If the pollen grains from this flower A, they get transferred to the flower B, both A flower and B flower, they are located in the same plant. They are located on the same plant. If the pollen grains, they transfer from anther to the stigma of another flower, flower is different but plant is same. This is called as geitonogamy. What is geitonogamy? Transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of another flower located on same plant. Plant is same but the flower is different. This type of pollination is called as geitonogamy. Now, the second type of cross-pollination is xenogamy. Xenogamy means the transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of another flower located on different plant. Here there are two different plants, two different flowers. This type of pollination is called as xenogamy. What is xenogamy? Transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of another flower located on the different plant. It is called as xenogamy. Transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of same flower. It is called as autogamy. Autogamy it is. transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of another flower located on the same plant, it is called as geitonogamy. It is called as geitonogamy. Transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of another flower located on the another plant, it is called as xenogamy. Xenogamy. Now, after understanding the two different types of cross-pollination, that is geitonogamy and xenogamy, let us try to define the cross-pollination. Cross-pollination means transfer of pollens from anther to the stigma of another flower located on same plant or on different plant. It is called as cross-pollination. We have seen the definition of the self-pollination, cross-pollination, types of cross-pollination with the help of diagram. I hope you people have got an idea about pollination process. In our next video, we are going to understand what are the strategies, what are the techniques for self-pollination, for cross-pollination. That can be studied under the heading Clistogamous flowers and the Chasmogamous flower. We are going to discuss the characteristic features of the Clistogamous flowers and the Chasmogamous flower. I hope you people are very much clear about the pollination process. If you like this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you so much.